Welcome to another edition of the Official Jets Podcast, the Draft Podcast presented by Pepsi. The draft is over. Ethan, EA, Becht, and Coleman on the other side of the BetMGM studio. The Jets started with 10 picks. They shuffled around. They still have 10 picks. That's how they end up the 2021 NFL Draft. I'm just curious what everyone thinks of the draft class as a whole. Let's start with EA.
I'm worried about your mental well-being.
Why?
You love the draft.
I do love the draft.
This is one of your favorite weekends of the year. It might be the top weekend of all.
The draft, the first padded practice of training camp is right up there too. But the draft is definitely, I think it's up there. It's got to be 1A for me.
Yeah. Listen, I think it's an exhausting weekend, but for the New York Jets and their fan base, they should be enthused about what actually transpired over the course of 3 days. Starts with Zach Wilson at number 2 overall. He will be the headliner. He will be the person that we will come back to in 5, in 10 years and say, how did the Jets do in the draft? Well, it's going to be largely based on what happens with this guy who wore number 1 at BYU. So he comes in there, and Joe Douglas adds around him with the next 3 picks. And then here on day 3, we're finishing it up here. The Jets go final 6 picks with the defensive flavor. I think in all, Joe Douglas was very active, 3 trades. And like you mentioned, a lot of wheeling and dealing, but the Jets still finished with 10 picks. And the other good thing is the Jets have a lot of capital for next year's draft that you're already looking forward to, Greens. 2 first-round picks in 2022. 2 second-round picks. Anthony, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think they got a lot of production out of their draft this year. I think that, the players that they felt like they got have more value than the spots that they actually drafted them in. And I think that's great, so they really feel good as an organization. I'm going to make an early prediction. I think there's going to be at least 5 starters out of these 10 in week 1. How about that? So that would be unprecedented if you could figure that one out and get those guys going. So, listen, this team needs competition. Robert Sala's been talking about that pretty much all weekend. These guys are going to get a chance to compete. And, depending on who else comes in, undrafted free agents, this could be a really, really, really good job by Joe Douglas and his staff putting this draft class together.
Yeah, I thought they did an excellent job. And when I look at the overall draft, I mean, obviously you have Zach Wilson, Elijah Vera Tucker, but from then on, it's speed, speed, speed. And that's what Robert Saleh likes. He loves that speed. And you look at the defensive side of the ball, 2 former safeties in Sherwood and in Nazarene, 2 guys who are big. They're 6'3". They're long arms. They're physical. They come down in the box. They can cover tight ends, but at the same time, they're not afraid to come down in the box and lower the boom. These guys are going to transition to linebackers, covering from sideline to sideline. Then you have the defensive backs who are very agile. They can play multiple positions, cornerback, nickel, safety. All these guys are versatile. They added a lot of speed this weekend, and it's going to be exciting to see them.
Coleman, I'm going to pinball it back to you, and we'll go in reverse order. The Jets had 7 picks on day 3. Is there one person that stands out to you, maybe not even as a player, but a pick that you particularly like? And you kind of alluded to it, I think, with Sherwood and Nasruddin. But if you choose to go in a different direction, that's fine. If you want to go in the same direction, that's fine as well.
Because AB loves Sherwood. I'll tell you that one right now.
Well, I like Jason Pinnock as well, the corner out of Pitt. This is a great cover corner. He did a great job of getting stops, getting off the field. He traveled around the field, covering their best receiver. They played a lot of man-to-man coverage. We all know that in this defense there's going to be a lot of single high. You're going to play a lot of man-to-man. There's going to be some cover 3. You're going to have to mix things up. So getting a cornerback like Jason Pinnock is going to be a big addition to your defense. What about you, Anthony?
Yeah, man, look, it's going to be Sherwood. I just listen, I think he's a day 1 starter. I really do believe that. There was a lot of buzz about him, not today, like before the draft started. And they got him, right? So they know something about this kid that's going to fit, and it's all about fit. It's all about what a kid can do for the system. And so, listen, he played as much as 230 at Auburn, playing his position. He's going to come down and play a little bit of that hybrid backer, whatever you want to call it, but power, strength, heavy hitter, I mentioned it, earlier today. 34-inch arms, which is the longest arm length in 15 years of the draft of any DB. So he's going to be able to go up and contest balls versus some of these bigger, athletic, basketball-style tight ends that are in the league right now. And look, I want to see what he's got. We need those components on the field: speed, side to side, coming downhill, and be able to cover. You have to have that package because that's the kind of defense that this team wants and needs.
I think I know who EA is going to say, but go for it.
I'm going Michael Carter.
Yeah, I just for the record, I'm also going Michael Carter.
Yeah, but you might be taking the guy from Duke. I will say I'm going to go right in the research triangle, staying right there, and say Michael Carter, because I see parallels to what happened to the Jets on day 2 of the draft, where they were crossing their fingers Elijah Moore was there, and he sure enough was at 34. Then we enter day 3, and here we go again, and they get Michael Carter. And you need offensive weapons to win in the National Football League. It does start up front, but this guy can do it in all phases. Fellas, this stat is just ridiculous. 33 evaded tackles, 3rd most in the FBS last year. He rushed for more than 1,200 yards, 8 yards per carry. He made it happen big time. Maybe he's not the fastest guy in a 40-yard dash, but he is a big play waiting to happen, and he is an adept receiver. He's also sturdy as a blocker as well. He's going to fit in awfully well in this outside zone running scheme. So, Zach Wilson, what are you going to add? Well, you add a piece up front in Elijah Vera Tucker. Then you get Elijah Moore, Elijah squared, and then Michael Carter coming back in the 4th round.
And Michael Carter squared.
Yeah, that's something else.
That was one of my favorite Joe Douglas lines. He said, "We're really cornering the market on Elijah's and Michael Carter's." and you're right, the Jets did draft another Michael Carter, but my favorite selection of day 3 was the UNC running back. I mean, we saw the highlights just a moment ago. I mean, you can really see the vision and the stop-start ability. That's what he talked about, and I think you hit the nail on the head. I think he fits what the Jets want to run here extremely well. And this game, UNC against Miami, is when Javonte Williams and Michael Carter both ran extremely wild, and 6.3 yards a pop for his career at UNC. He has an outstanding career there, and he's a solid receiver out of the backfield. But this is really what I would consider like Chapter 2 in the offseason. There's Chapter 1, which is free agency. The draft is Chapter 2. Now comes Chapter 3, which is, a little more trickle of free agency here and there, and then training camp and developing your players. So, Anthony, let's start with you, then we'll go to EC. What do you think about the way that this roster is coming together when you think about where it was before free agency? Now we're 2/3 of the way home to training camp, and it seems like this roster has been overhauled by a considerable amount, more than I think a lot of people thought could be possible.
Yeah, another thing about Michael Carter, guys, he split the carries. I mean, he may have had over 2,000 yards rushing by himself if he was the lead back. But, yeah, the roster's great. I mean, listen, Carl Lawson, he's a unicorn pass rusher. He can do a lot of things. Led one of the leaders in the NFL in quarterback pressures. Corey Davis, he's a top 5 draft pick. Blew up last year. Earned his spot. Now he's going to be a 1. Jared Davis, he's another guy that, he's an in-the-box linebacker that's aggressive, speed, fast. He's going to be able to control the inside, and he's going to add a presence there at the linebacker position. Rankings coming back from the injury 2 years ago, bouncing back last year, getting back to form. They feel like they got a home run in him at the D-line position, and you go on and on and on. I mean, even from a standpoint of a Justin Hardy, just a tremendous, he's a corner, he's feisty. The dude, literally loves special teams. He even said it in his press conference, like, man, he just loves playing it. And you got to have those kind of guys, man. Boyer's going to love to have him. You're going to need a spark plug. Other players are going to feed off him because he plays it at such a high level. So, again, I'm excited. And we just talked, and the draft picks all together. I mean, it's a brand new team. It's a brand new team. It all starts, of course, with a quarterback. But, again, it takes some of the pressure off the quarterback when you start adding those pieces and put them in place.
Absolutely. And you talk about the rest of the roster. Everyone it's easy to forget about C.J. Mosley. I mean, listen, this guy was one of the most dominant linebackers a couple of years ago. Played, we talked about it over the weekend, played some of the three of the best quarters that we've seen out of a linebacker in 2019. But, he's coming back into the fold. You have a lot of young guys. You have Quinnen Williams, who was dominant last year, who should have been a Pro Bowler. You add in these other pieces. LaMarcus Joyner is a safety who can come down in the box, cover slot receivers. You add him with Marcus May in the secondary. You just can't help but get excited about all the speed that you see, all the agility that you have in this defense. And then on the offensive side of the ball, of course, you got Becht already. Then you add Vera Tucker. The offensive line is getting solidified. It's going to be very exciting to see how this team comes out, especially once Coach Saleh starts to get his mentality, starts to get that aggression into the players.
This team is really young, which is good. I think it's a double-edged sword. It can be good, but you're also going to have a learning process, right? The Jets, of course, won 2 games last year, and Anthony talked about the infusion of talent and how this roster's been, we've seen a complete overhaul. I'm wondering, as I listen to you guys talk, and then we take into consideration everything that's changed on the roster, do you start thinking about what this team is capable of? I'm not talking 13 wins, all this stuff, but 17 games scheduled next year. We don't know. We know the opponents. We don't know what that's going to be looking like, but why can't this team, if it all comes together, be in the mix as far as being around more like 500? Is that jump so significant in the National Football League nowadays, where you see teams make the turn every year? Can the Jets be one of those teams that can get themselves into more in the middle of the rung in the National Football League as opposed to where they ended the season last year?
I don't think it's far-fetched, especially when you consider the caliber of players the Jets have brought in. I will say, for someone like Carl Lawson, he only had, 5.5 sacks last year, but he led the NFL in quarterback pressures among defensive linemen. So for a guy like that, you're hoping you buy stock before they really take off. No Jet pun intended. And so with guys like that, Corey Davis hasn't had an 1,000-yard season, but you look at his track record, it seems like he's an ascending player. It seems like all the players the Jets signed are ascending players, except for maybe somebody like Vinny Curry, who's later on in his career. But I really think that the Jets have completely overhauled this roster, and it feels like Joe Douglas is really putting his imprint on this team more so than last season, because he didn't quite have the financial flexibility and the capital in the draft that he did this year. And I'm excited to see what happens. And the last thing that I want to say, or the last thing I want to do before we wrap up here, and I'm curious because we have 2 former NFL players across the way here. This is a draft recap. What's next for all these rookies? I know there's rookie minicamp, but can you kind of take us through? Let's start with Coleman. What happens when you get the playbook, and then take us through what is a rookie season and what many college players consider, and rookies consider, the longest years of their lives?
Yeah, as a rookie, it is the longest year. You finish your college season, you go to your bowl, and then you start preparing for the combine, for your pro day, and then you get, if you're fortunate enough, you get drafted, you get signed as a free agent, and then there's rookie minicamp. We heard Coach talk about it earlier. Rookie minicamp is next week. You come in here, you learn the fundamentals of the defense or the offense. You get your playbook. You're doing nothing but studying. You're diving into that book, because if you don't know, you can't go. Yeah. And you have to know what you want. You have to know what you're doing once you get out here. Once the veterans come in, listen, if you're a rookie right now, this is your time to take advantage of it, because everyone's starting off at the same area. The veterans, they don't know this defense. They don't know the offense. It's a new scheme for everyone. And so if you're a rookie, if you put your mind to it, you study, now you can start playing with the big boys. You get in there and get your opportunities, start making a difference in training camp and mini camp. And next thing you know, you're in the season going full speed, and you're in the mix.
College is over.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
It's literally, it's a punch you in the face kind of moment. I talked about it earlier, but it really is. You have to mature yourself at a different level. You have to be ready to become a pro now, because there are expectation levels on younger players. The league right now is a younger league, And you see younger players having a lot of success across the NFL. The Jets have to have that kind of output from their younger players, and at their most key position. You know, there's been a tremendous amount of rookie quarterbacks coming in playing some good ball. And I'll be quite honest with you, I expect that out of Zach Wilson. And, you know, that's going to be the biggest play on this, is getting these guys have to make a commitment to professionalism, because a coach can coach, they can give you everything, all the information you need, but if you aren't dialed in to say, okay, I got all this money in the bank, put that here, get dialed in on the field, note after note, detail after detail, put it all into play. If you don't do it like Erik was talking about, you will fail. Bottom line, you cannot cut corners, in particular when you're a younger player, because if you do, you fall behind. And if you start falling behind every single day, somebody's gaining on you, and it may not be the guy in the building. It may be the guy in Miami. It may be the guy in New England, or wherever team that those guys are. So it's just so critical for young players to really just, you got to grow up, period. And Joe talked about the character of these guys. I expect those kind of guys. You hear about work ethic, you hear about leadership from these players, then I would expect them to do those small things and learn how to get better at those things from some of the veteran players in the building, so that this team, like you said, our EA, can be much better than last year and the year before. But I look more of a 3-year outlook for this team. Okay? Because for me, it's the first year, get growing, next year, all those draft picks, and now another year for them to grow. I look at a 3-year window where this could be, honestly, the most improved team in the NFL.
How about that? Yeah. The sobering thought in all this is that I think every team in the AFC East has gotten better this offseason. We saw what the Buffalo Bills did last year. They were 13-3, I believe, and they went undefeated in the division. The Patriots spent a boatload. They spent a boatload of money in free agency. So I think they definitely improved as well. And then Miami, speaking about assets, that's a team that had assets that was on parallel with the New York Jets. So I think all those teams, on paper at least, did not take a step back here this offseason. And we've talked about this in the pre-draft process, was every team in the National Football League feels better after draft weekend. But I think from a Jets perspective, Anthony just mentioned it, is that you are installing new systems. But the great thing defensively is Robert Saleh and Jeff Ulbricht's going to keep it simple. They're going to attack the quarterback. They're going to play that 4-3, and they want those guys running all over the place. We saw them attack in free agency along that defensive line, namely Carl Lawson, but they added strength in numbers. Now we see what they're looking for in the linebackers, right? We saw that in the draft. You're good at safety, cornerbacks. You added an infusion of talent here on day 3 of the draft. On the offensive side of the ball, all the talk's going to be about Zach Wilson, but I think the system that Mike LaFleur is going to run is going to be very helpful for a rookie quarterback, because the Jets are going to try to pound you with the run game, then do the boots and the rolls and get this athletic kid out on the move, and he's comfortable doing that, and you've gotten a lot better around him at the receiver position starting at free agency. Then you add Elijah Moore in the draft. You bring in Michael Carter in the draft behind you in the offensive backfield, and it all starts up front, and you have 2 pieces in Becht and
Elijah Vera Tucker,
as I was looking at my phone. I think my wife just called me here on the podcast. But big-time pieces in front of your young quarterback. So right now it's getting it on the field and then absorbing those new systems. And Robert Saleh era is taking off right now.
The NFL draft came, it went. The Jets got 10 players, headlined by Zach Wilson, of course, at the number 2 overall pick. EA and I will be back. We can't thank Anthony and Erik Coleman enough for being here live all 3 days in the BetMGM studio. That's all we have on this episode of the official Jets podcast, the Draft Podcast, presented by Pepsi.